Consider the lilies, how they grow. They toil not, they spin not. And yet I say unto you that Solomon in all his glory was not arrayed like one of these. If then God so clothed the grass, which is today in the field and tomorrow is cast into the oven, how much more will he clothe you, O ye of little faith? And seek not ye what ye shall eat or what ye shall drink, neither be ye of doubtful mind.
This is our kingdom, a kingdom of righteousness. Praise the Lord. Praise ye the Lord.
For all these things do the nations of the world seek after, and your Father knoweth that ye have need of these things. But rather seek ye the kingdom of God, and all these things shall be added unto you. Fear not, little flock, for it is your Father's good pleasure to give you the kingdom. Sell that ye have, and give alms. Provide yourselves bags which wax not old, a treasure in the heavens that faileth not, where no thief approacheth, neither moth corrupteth. For where your treasure is, there will your heart be also. To the kingdom of Israel!
Yahweh Hashem Yahushua, Yahweh Hashem Yahushua, Yahweh Hashem Yahushua, Yahweh Hashem Yahushua.
The election, an aristocracy, meaning rule of the best, a group or class considered superior to others, a government by the best men in the state, a governing body composed of the best men in the state, and that's the elect. We're about to have it all right? Psalms 37 and verse 11, and it reads, "But the meek shall inherit the earth, and shall delight themselves in the abundance of peace." That word for peace in the Hebrew is shalom, which goes into safety, soundness in body, meaning we're going to truly have rest, welfare, health, prosperity, peace, quiet, tranquility, contentment. So we're going to fully enjoy the planet Earth. We're going to rule and exist within the Lord's creation as we were created to do. I'm ready to rule the world, man. How about you?
Let the golden light of this sunset guide our hearts in peace.
Fear not, little flock, and give alms. Provide yourselves bags which wax not old, a treasure in the heavens that faileth not, where no thief approacheth, neither moth corrupteth. For where your treasure is, there will your heart be also.
The ocean spirit dances today to abundance and joy and to eternal peace.
See, this is what we're hoping for. This is part of our hope. Not only that we are members of the elect, whose fruits meet for repentance, like John the Baptist said, but from our lower state, because we've been brought low, even though we have this knowledge, we have this truth. Remember what it said in Revelation. I know thy works in tribulation and poverty, but thou art rich. Why are we rich? Because we're rich in faith. We have this knowledge. So our hope is at our last end, we're going to be increased. Okay? And if you ask me, the greatest riches right now is to be delivered by Yahushua is to get that new body that the Apostle Paul spoke about in 1 Corinthians 15th chapter, to get that, get that new body where we'll never be sick, we'll be immortals, like it said in 1 Corinthians 15, to be delivered from the coming destruction, and to be a part of Yahushua's cabinet in the next kingdom. Okay, those are the real riches right now. That's what we want to get. Because if you get that, you got everything. I mean, you got everything. Okay, so our sights are set a lot higher than this present world. All right, as it is written, the fashion of this world shall pass away. We are individuals of vision, and the scripture said, where an individual lacks vision, he perishes. Okay, so we can see the future. All right, and we hope that we're going to be part of it, beginning with the elect.
All right. Shalom. First and foremost, I would like to give all praise and glory unto Yahweh Bahashem, Yahweh Shah Bahashem, Kakwadash, and double honors unto the apostles and the elders of GMS who rule well, teach well, being great examples towards younger brothers. And peace and blessings and salutation to the hopeful elect out there pushing this word in truth and in sincerity across the four winds. In the name of Yahweh Bahashem, Yahweh Shah Bahashem, Kakwadash, pushing to get up out of here. Shalom to the hopeful elect, the believers, the listeners who have came back to the obedience of the scripture through faith in Yahweh Bashem Shah. All right. And what we're going to get into this morning, all right, morning news and prophecy. Technocracy was always the plan, going back, even to the into the early, 1900s. The devils, had doctrines, concerning the technocracy, okay, where the government will be ruled by scientists and engineers, okay, and elite banking families. All right. But back then they didn't have the technology. And now that these devils possess the technology, that they can do mass surveillance, automated, government, function, when it comes to, taxes and, identification, okay, banking, you see. So now that these devils have the technology, to try to pull off, a technocracy, well, they're going for it. All right. And the only thing that we see happening, every move being made up top, is to push technocracy. Okay. So let's get a couple of precepts. They got a couple of videos to get into. Okay, but it's clear, and it's becoming, common knowledge. You see, this the thing too about Esau is that the longer he takes to pull this thing out, to try to roll this thing out, the more that it's becoming common knowledge about what he's trying to do. Okay, and that's why what the devil doing is time sensitive. Okay, and it's the Lord putting pressure on Esau to go ahead and go with his move. All right, in these last days. Now, when you go to the book of Mark, chapter 13 and 28, it says, "Now learn a parable of the fig tree. When her branch is yet tender and putteth forth leaves, ye know that summer is not." All right, and this is another telltale of the signs, because prophecies, at one time, it was unseen. Okay, you go into the 90s. All right, well, the prophecy of the Third World War, that wasn't seen. When our apostles and elders were out street teaching, in the 80s, the 90s, and then even before that, the elders of our elders, and apostles out there in the 70s, man. You see? Well, World War III wasn't evident. It hasn't broke ground. Certain things, the MOTB, the digital system. See, these things wasn't evident back then. But now we're in the time where we see these things are budding out. We can fully see, okay, we in that time. These prophecies have not only taken root, but they broken ground and turned into, trees that are budding. Okay. So just as, this parable dealing with a fig tree, we have to relate that to prophecy, man. Okay. To where prophecy has grown up in the earth, to where it's evident that we in the time, okay, where these things are going to happen. You see, we in the time of prophecy, budding forth in the earth. Okay. Because, like I say, one announcement can change everything. One event can take this thing to a whole nother phase. You see, because everything is now pegged to prophecy, man. Everything is tied to prophecy in these times. When you go into the talking points of the news, well, everything is centered in prophecy, man. The main talking points. So this lets us know what time we're in. All right, summer is not. Summer is that time of you do your first harvest. Early summer. Late spring is when you would do your harvest. Okay, so the earth is being ripe, for a harvest. A harvest of the elect and the judgment on the rest, man. The elect being delivered, brought up into those chariots. Okay, that good fruit. Okay, and everything else, discarded. Okay, these are the times that we are in. So when you read verse 29, so ye in like manner, when ye shall see these things come to pass, know that it is not even at the doors. It's at the doors. Okay? Because this devil, he's at the point to where he wants to switch over his system, man. Okay? Like I say in prophecy, through the spirit of Yahweh Bashem Shai has pressure on the devil, man. To where he's gonna have to cause these crises, okay, and bring about a mandate, okay, as the solution to the crises. These things at the door, they've already set up, false flag narratives. You see, they already set up, legislation to persecute, okay, and imprison, and punish, anti-Americans and anti-Semitism and anti-capitalism and anti-tech. So all these things are already in the making. Okay, all these things already exist. Okay, on the books. Okay, and now you have these alliances from all these nations, dealing with this third world war. All these alliances become invisible now. Okay, because with this incident with the small heads, America and Iran, it's forcing countries to pick a side. Okay, and they're picking sides according to the alliances of the Bible. So we at the door, and this devil, you can tell he knows that he's here. Okay, he knows that he's at the point to where he got to deal with prophecy, because this whole thing is to offset prophecy. Okay, his whole thing is to rewrite the ending. Verse 30 said, "Verily I say unto you, that this generation shall not pass till all these things be done." And there's no doubt that this is that generation. There's no doubt that we are that generation that Yahweh was speaking of. Okay, because these spirits he was teaching to back then, whether they received or, okay, the elect and the 2/3 that they're back. One to be delivered, shown mercy, rewarded, and one to be judged and caught up in the destruction. But this generation is back that Yahweh Shah was teaching to in these days. Okay? So this generation not going to pass to all these things be done. So in our lifetime, we're going to see the MOTB. We're going to see this third world war. And we're going to see the return of Yahweh. Okay? And this was always, as we talked about, technocracy was always the agenda for Esau. Well, the return of Yahweh, okay, was the agenda for the Most High, which is going to triumph, all right, the agenda of Esau Edom. When you go here, because we're coming to a time where Esau going to be cut off, man. He's going to be cut off from power. Okay, we have to understand we're getting ready to witness Esau be cut off from power, man. And reduced and demoted, okay, to slavery. All right, so just get to the point when you get to Psalm 37:9, it said, "For evildoers shall be cut off, but those that wait upon the Lord, they shall inherit the earth." A transition of kingdoms. Okay, so this devil, the closer he gets to pulling this technocracy off, the closer he gets to being cut off from power. Okay, and being a slave. And after his slavery over 1,000 years, he's going to be cut off as a people in the earth. Okay, while we continue to inherit the earth and righteousness forever. Okay, which is Israel, beginning with the elect of Israel, man. That's going to get ready to inherit the earth, man. All right, and those that wait upon the Lord, as we understand, this devil, he's going to present this technocracy as the fix-all. Okay, but the Lord has put it in the spirit of the elect to wait upon him and his salvation, true salvation, man. Okay, so but those that wait upon the Lord is finna inherit. Our test is going to be faith. So like our faith is going to be tested on a whole nother level. Okay, and we have to have that unmovable faith. We have to have the mindset of leaving this world behind. Okay, with the expectation of the promises of the scriptures coming to pass, man. Okay, and not be moved by the threats of Esau. Okay, of not being able to participate in his society without this technology, man. That these things should move us going into these times. Verse 10, it says, "Yet for a little while, and the wicked shall not be. Yet though, it says, thou shalt diligently consider his place, and it shall not be." Okay, because the earth is, so used to Edomite rulership and Edomite superiority for centuries, man. That's been his place in the world order. These Edomites have been at the top. Okay? But we come to a time, all right, when that position is going to be snatched away. His place. Because right now he's in first place. He's the head. You see? But what he's attempting to do is going to have him what? As the tail. Okay? So this man is going to be the tail of society. All right, no more Edomite press conferences and niggas lying and TED talks and talking about what they got next and sustainability goals and 2030 and this. Nah, man. All that's going to be done away with, man. It's going to be a righteous kingdom ruled by a righteous nation of people, man. All right, the 12 tribes of Israel under Yahweh. Okay. So it's beautiful what the devil is doing because it plays, okay, into the Lord's agenda, and Esau in his mind, he think that he has some type of loophole to one up, okay, the Most High. You see, which is complete, foolishness, man. That's why the scripture calls this man a goddamn fool. You see, so let's go here. I believe it's Psalms 14. Yep. This is Psalms 14:1. All right, the Psalm of David said, "The fool have said in his heart, there is no power, there is no God. They are corrupt. They have done abominable works. There is none that do it good, man." And this is you Edomites, man. Goddamn fool, because you move as if, all right, a higher power, okay, doesn't exist. Okay, or if you surpass, the ability to be judged by a higher power. That's how these devils operate. To where they boast in their wickedness and what they're going to do next. You see, as if they have some power within themselves to do what they want. You see, that's why there's no limit to their corruption, how abominable they are, and there's none of you Edomites to do good, man. Okay, all you Edomites, okay, are part of this abominable and corrupt nation. You see, and if you lower level Edomites had the wealth and the status and was privy to, the witchcraft of these elites, you would do the same thing. Okay, because you devils as a nation, you're just not right. Okay, and that's why there's a judgment to come against this family, as the scriptures say. Okay, now let's go here. Let's get this video. Yep, the brother got that. Get that as well. This is the brother, all right, Nabala, GMS Virgin Island, Straight Gate. Joel 12:16 said, "With him is strength and wisdom." With who? With the Most High. Okay, all power and wisdom, where he's the source of it. Okay, Yahweh Shai said, "Well, all power in heaven and earth was given unto him." Given to him by who? The Heavenly Father, Yahweh. You see, he's a source of strength and wisdom. You see, and these devils, they think that they're, some type of self-reliant power. No, man. Okay, the power given to you, Edomites, was given to you by our power. Okay, and that power is going to be stripped away, and it's being stripped away. All right, and that's why Esau is looking like a damn fool out here, man. Okay, because the Lord is stripping him of that power that he gave him to run the earth. You see, Esau has one more task, to wild out on the civilians. Okay, to to provoke, okay, a global war, and to mandate this sea hip. You see, so Esau Edom, the Lord is stripping this man from power because he's going to be removed from power. It says the deceived and the deceiver are his. Okay, so those that are deceived, the Lord wanted them deceived, man. And the Lord set up the deceiver to deceive. Okay, and Esau Edom, his kingdom is based on deception, and he's to the point that he's deceived himself. Okay, the fact that he thinks that he's going to pull this off, he's deceived his goddamn self, man. You see? So let's play this real quick.
You could be the guy who's in the computer room or whatever. Again, like computers, but you could be that, and it's no longer the guy who is, riding on horseback, rallying people, being a leader, et cetera. I know it's a very simplistic way of looking at it, but I share that same viewpoint on it. It is interesting to see who is kind of rising to the top.
Yeah, I know what you mean. Yeah. So there's phases of history where humanity is more led by like a priest class or a warrior class or an intellectual class, and that produces different results for the direction of humanity. And so I can see what you're saying. If we're being led by a kind of tech class, the people at the top of the tech pyramid, they're going to have a certain personality and a certain way of thinking. But especially when you look at people like Peter Thiel and Alex Karp, Palantir, and Elon Musk. I mean, these guys, they're definitely their vision of the world is very much a tyrannical, freedom limited kind of world. In case of Peter Thiel, he wanted a world where there's basically no countries. He wants corporations to run the world. And Alex Karp, he's been openly talking about. He had his like manifesto that was like an excerpt from the book that he published with 22 points, and it's very much about surveillance, top-down hierarchy. Elon Musk, he's got connections to the technocracy movement through his maternal grandfather, Joshua Haldeman, who was in with the technocracy movement originally in Canada in the 1920s, 30s, 40s. And technocracy is also, there's lots of aspects to technocracy ruled by technicians and ruled by scientists and engineers that plan out. It's kind of like central. It's got a central planning aspect to it, which is communism, which has failed. Communism has absolutely failed throughout the world, and it's interesting that Elon Musk is pushing that kind of thing, whilst trying to kind of play both sides and pretend that he is really cool, and he pushes back against woke ideology, or he pushes back against illegal immigration. But here he is on the other side of the coin, saying he believes in vaccines, he believes in carbon taxes, he believes in obviously technocracy and technates, which is leading towards some kind of regional world government, where we were just talking about earlier in the interview, where there's like a world government that made up of just different super regions. And Musk is, interestingly enough, he was actually spotted at a satanic ritual when he was around 12.
Yeah, and going back to, these super regions, and this is another part of this fighting, because they're carving out this new world order. I said there's multiple purposes, why these devils start war. All right, now we know the elite's main thing is a global reset. All right, and also you have, fight for different territory as they're carving out, certain regions. All right, because after wars, maps are redrawn. When you go to war, okay, maps are redrawn. Okay, the map of World War I is different from the map of World War II. Okay, in this Third World War, they plan on redrawing maps, having new regions, and okay, that's why you see these nations, fighting, all right, for dominance in particular regions. Okay, and they're pushing back, one against another, but it's all, like I said, they're fighting it to the door of this new world order. All right. Let me see real quick. Let's see if we can look something up. Map change. Yep. So let's go here real quick. Because he spoke on those regional powers. So let's pull this up. Okay, what's a little something? All right, so just quick Google. I add, do maps change after wars? It says yes, maps change dramatically after wars. Treaties can redraw international borders, create new countries, or dissolve old empires. Beyond political lines, physical maps physically change as cities are rebuilt, rivers are diverted, and infrastructure is updated following major conflicts. Okay, so going into these different oligarchs, they want to rule the world, all right, through corporations. They want to get away from these these governments, all right, these nations. We see France, Britain, okay, Sweden. They want regions. Okay, Europe, and they want regions. Okay, they want the technocrats. Okay, because we go into one of the doctrines of technocracy is about ruling the world. Okay, from these super regions. One of the regions of technocracy. Okay, you had the map of America, Canada. Okay, Greenland. Okay, you hear these talks about Greenland. Okay, and Venezuela was a part of it as well. Okay, the region, carved out in the Western Hemisphere, a super region. to rule as a part of a global technocracy, man. Okay, so like when you go to war, regions change. You see, it said treaties can withdraw. All right, international borders, create new countries, or dissolve old empires. All right, and they really wanted to dissolve Iran. They really wanted to dissolve Russia as well. You know, so you got these nations are like, nah, we ain't gonna dissolve. We gonna participate in the new world order, but they're dissolving and think you're gonna, because these oligarchs they always trying to swallow each other up, man. They always trying to um uh dissolve each other. This group of oligarchs want to, dissolve this group of oligarchs, okay, and take their wealth and territory resources. Okay. So you have that, these rivalries and these feuds that go on. All right, it says physical maps physically change, the cities are rebuilt, rivers are diverted, and infrastructure is updated following major conflicts, and they want to turn a lot of these cities, okay, into smart cities. Okay, so they use war as a means of demolition as well. Okay, World War One said the treaties that ended the war dissolved four major empires: the Austro-Hungarian, the Russian, the German, and the Ottoman empires, leading to the creation of new nations like Poland, all right, Czechoslovakia, if I'm saying that right, and Yugoslavia. Okay, so World War One dissolved, all right, four major empires. Okay, because the elites wanted to do away with monarchs. Okay, because it's easily to control, all right, a democratic government, where you can buy out all the officials. You see? And it says World War II, it said the global map was completely withdrawn. Actually, after World War II, the global map was completely redrawn, notably splitting Germany into east and west and shifting the borders of countries like Poland. The Cold War, the end of the Cold War, and the dissolution of the Soviet Union in the early 1990s created 15 new independent countries, completely reshaping the geopolitical map of Eastern Europe and Central Asia. Okay, so wars, change maps. Okay, and these devils in this war, you're seeing, these different, nations, fight for dominance in certain regions, certain trade, all right, in the pathways, okay, trade routes, whether on land or on sea, especially on sea. That's why Strait of Hormuz is a big issue going into this new world order. Who's going to control that going into the new world order? Okay. It says even in modern time, map makers are digital navigation platforms like it's something else. But just to make that point, all right. Well, let's play some more of this.
There was an SRA victim called Jessica Chebot has failed. Communism has absolutely failed throughout the world, and it's interesting that Elon Musk is pushing that kind of thing whilst trying to kind of play both sides and pretend that he is really cool, and he pushes back against woke ideology, or he pushes back against illegal immigration. But here he is on the other side of the coin, saying he believes in vaccines, he believes in carbon taxes, he believes in obviously technocracy and technates, which is leading towards some kind of regional world government where we were just talking about earlier in the interview, where there's like a world government that made up of just different super regions. And Musk is, interestingly enough, he was actually spotted at a satanic ritual when he was around 12. There was an SRA victim called Jessica Chebota who talked about this. She said that she remembers seeing Musk there and at this ritual. Now, he was more of a victim at that point, but this is what happens with this intergenerational Satanism, where these people are brought into families and they're basically brought to these rituals kind of their spirits broken, and they're basically even if they're not really, and then at a certain point they're basically kind of invited or groomed into to be a participant and to take a leading role in being like the perpetrator of this satanic network. So I don't know to what degree Musk went deep into the satanic world, but I do know that we have this I think a very credible witness talking about.
So he knee deep into it. You see, to be a part of this circle, which he's just a mascot. Okay, for the elites. Okay, and that's another thing too. They they get everybody looking at all these different characters and not paying attention that they're all playing into one system. Okay. And the whole thing about the trap that the devils build it around the masses, and they focus on all these different parts of the system, and they create all these different characters, the Alex Karp, the Peter Thiels, the Sam Altmans, Elon Musk, Larry Ellison, okay, and all these different characters in their companies and their different narratives, but it's all working towards one agenda. It's all for one system, okay? But that's another so like that's another layer of deception, okay, that they use. Salaki.
How she saw him there when he was 12, and interesting enough, Nathan Rothschild was also at the same ritual, and that's of course not surprising since the Rothschilds are just a key part of this whole evil satanic system.
Yeah, if we could touch on that a bit, and perhaps some people tuning in, if this is kind of, maybe I'm sure they've heard of it, but maybe they're not perhaps more intimately familiar. If we might touch on that for just a moment. I guess I don't want to speak for you, but if you could, well, here, at least my perception of it, you let me know if I'm wrong, is basically more or less the real power structure in the world is involved in these practices. And that involves obviously criminal enterprises such as the trafficking of minors, and obviously drugs, and using financial instruments and means to bring about controlled demolitions of economies or nation states. I think of the IMF, doing what they do as far as resource extraction goes, setting countries up to fail from the start. Could you, I guess, briefly touch on how, as you see it, given your work?
Yeah, sure. So basically,
and also too, these nations, he made a point with how the IMF sets up these countries to fail, because we know the IMF, is the an international banker. Okay, it's an international bank, that at least used to put these nations in debt. Okay, and it's intentionally, used to impoverish, most of the world's nations, to make their governments look like failures. Okay, all these governments have been, sabotaged, okay, bought out, to look like failures, so they can bring in the technocracy as a savior. With the technocracy, you won't have, okay, deflation. You see, you get rid of all these currencies, then no currency will be better than the other. Everyone will be on the evil playing field. Everyone will have a fair shot, or a fair shake. So the IMF, they play their part in setting these governments up for failure. And it was always set up for the technocracy to come in at the end to look like the hero of the world's governments. Okay, to be these peacemakers, to be these financial, saviors. Okay, and to update humanity in a better way of governance, which is through technocracy. Okay, so play a little more.
I wrote a book and released and published in 2023 called The International Satanic Network Exposed. Survivors reveal names of presidents, prime ministers, and royals. And so it goes into naming particular people that have been seen repeatedly at these satanic rituals. And
he's going into the rituals, because we know spiritual wickedness in high places. Okay, I'll put the link to this video in the comments. So let's go here to this video. Let's segue. All right, so you got so yeah, let's go here. Now we know the game, that these devils play with this AI, to get people to accept, the acceleration, of AI in day-to-day society. Okay. Well, they push, China as the boogeyman, which there are. Like I said, there is competition between these nations. They work together. They trade amongst one another. Okay. They're part of these, these secret councils, okay, of a global world order. Okay. But remember, Esau, all right, he doesn't have these, his relationships are not based on integrity, honor. All right. So it's not the relationship that these nations has are not set in stone. Okay. A lot of these nations, okay, despise each other, but they deal with each other because of convenience. Okay. Because of the system of convenience. Dealing with, certain, energy needs, certain resource swaps. Okay, that benefits both nations. So these nations deal with each other mainly on convenience. It's not a thing of this airtight, okay, alliance that they have. All right, it's a very toxic relationship between these nations, man. Which I say they all agree with the New World Order. Okay. But there's competition, there's treachery, as the scriptures speak about what? Treachery. When thou cease from treachery, they shall deal with thee treacherously. Was it Isaiah 33 and 1? If brother want to get that, the scriptures speak heavy about the treachery of these nations. EU nations turning on America, But what these devils do, they use, China, out of context, mainly China, when it comes to AI, because AI, well, you look at China, and China is ahead of America as far as this digital infrastructure, the digital public infrastructure, social credit scoring, they're ahead of America, which we know that it's American companies and technology, that was invested into China. They got China where it is. Okay. Now China, uh, has taken that opportunity to begin to, level up as far as their own engineers and scientists, and their tech sector, has leveled up tremendously, by allowing America to come in, because it was much easier to roll this out in China because of the government style that China had, which ultimately is a more strict government. They got capital, they got capitalistic, as far as the corporations up top, but for the citizens, it's what you would call like a communist, okay, where the government, controls a lot of everyday life. You see? So with China already having, the biggest population with that style government, all right, the elites, poured a lot into China to get them to be, all right, the model of the New World Order. Okay. And they use that narrative, to accelerate, implementing New World Order policies and, infrastructure and technology in America. Is that we got to catch up with China or we're doomed. Okay. So let's play some more of this, and it's for you people, to not to question. You see, not to question what they're doing and what it's for. They give you a reason why it's for, to beat China. Okay, they're not gonna tell you, we're in your digital prison. They're not gonna come out and tell you that. They're gonna tell you need to beat China. Beat China, do what? Okay, talking about building a digital prison, man. Okay, so let's play this.
When you watch videos on social media, you should keep in mind in the back of your head that propaganda that was paid for by US big tech corporations. Because the US news website Wired revealed that big tech corporations from Silicon Valley are paying influencers on social media to spread disinformation against China and to spread propaganda in support of US AI companies. This report reveals that Silicon Valley oligarchs from corporations like OpenAI and Palantir are funding a super PAC, political action committee called Leading the Future, which is working with a dark money group called Build American AI. And they are funding influencers on social media to spread this propaganda. And they're not only targeting influencers who talk about politics and technology, they're also targeting apolitical lifestyle influencers to spread this disinformation. The report notes that marketing agencies are pitching influencers deals, such as paying them $5,000 to publish one TikTok video to amplify Build American AI's messaging about how China should be seen as a threat, whereas US AI corporations are cuddly unicorn and rainbow companies that just make everyone's lives so much better, and all they care about is benevolence and peace. If you don't believe me, this is the ridiculous propaganda that they're asking influencers to read and paying them money.
Yeah, so basically they're pushing China AI as the boogeyman AI. Okay, but American AI, is to make sure that China is not able to spread his boogeyman AI. Okay, but American AI is a good AI for the good guys. See, China has the villain AI. You see, and that's part of the agenda. So you don't question why there's such an uptick with AI. Okay, being implemented in everyday society. AI surveillance. Okay, digital ID. You see, all right, tracking. You know, and ultimately, when it gets to a certain point, the technology going in you, which is the seed. Okay, and see these influencers, and this is why these influencers, are being having to sell out. What you had the guy, what's his name, or Ha Davis. He had to go through his humiliation ritual. His woman, okay, getting ravaged by another man in front of him. Okay, you had this other guy supposed to be this parental advice influencer. His daughter, his 3-year-old daughter come up dead. Okay. Because these influencers, along with these celebrities, because see, these influencers have more reach than celebrities now. So these influencers are going to play a major part in pushing the propaganda from up top. Okay. So you people that, these people that make their living off the internet, okay, when they're being employed to push this propaganda. Okay. So let's play some more.
I'm reading. This is an exact quote from their propaganda. Quote, I just learned that China is trying really hard to beat the US in AI. If they do, it could mean that China gets personal data from me and my kids and take jobs that should be here in the US. In the AI innovation race, I'm Team USA, end quote. That's the kind of propaganda that influencers are getting paid thousands of dollars for one video And what's really happening here is that big tech corporations are working closely with the US government to try to criminalize protests and opposition and dissent. They're literally arguing that if you oppose these corporate monopolies in Silicon Valley from destroying your community and destroying the economy, then you are a so-called national security threat, and you are supposedly helping China in this new Cold War. If you don't believe me, here's another shocking report, or maybe not so shocking report, that was published by the major British newspaper, The Guardian, that reveals how the US Department of Justice is working with Elon Musk, the first trillionaire in history, in order to pollute impoverished communities.
He's not the first trillionaire. You know, there's families with way more wealth than Elon. All right, and Elon is a propped up, okay, trillionaire. You see, and I say he's just a mascot of, you know, these elite families. You know, another name and face, you know, to put blame on. So you don't pay attention to the system as a whole is being set up around you. Okay. And then you got Trump, you know, bagging Elon in these pollution lawsuits. You see how everything is for the agenda of technocracy, man. Nothing is for you people. Okay. So this is a country that you celebrate. You see, this is a country that you just celebrated. All right. You buying fireworks and, you know, you was getting in your red, white, and blue. Okay, they're planning on more data centers, taking more land, destroying more, okay, of the earth. You see, a depopulation agenda, civil unrest. All this is in the making. Okay, so let's play some more.
In the US. This article notes that the Trump administration is coming to the defense of Elon Musk in a lawsuit over claims that his artificial intelligence company, xAI, is polluting residential neighborhoods in North Mississippi. The lawsuit was filed by the NAACP, which is a civil rights organization led by Black Americans, and they allege that xAI and its subsidiary, MZX Tech, set up dozens of methane gas turbines to power its data center in Mississippi without air permits. These turbines are emitting toxic pollutants in violation of the Clean Air Act in a low-income majority Black community in Mississippi. So the US government is supporting these oligarchs from Silicon Valley as they are polluting impoverished communities. The Department of Justice says this data center is being used to train and develop AI models that are, quote, critical to the economy and the Department of War, end quote. And the Deputy Assistant Attorney General for the Justice Department said, quote, the Department of Justice will not sit idly by while private organizations use environmental laws to undermine our national security, end quote. This is absolutely dystopian. The US government is portraying civil rights organizations that are trying to represent average working class Americans in impoverished communities as national security threats because they don't want impoverished communities to be polluted by these Silicon Valley oligarchs who are a trillionaire now, or they have hundreds of billions of dollars of wealth.
Yeah, man. So you Americans, man. Okay, there's no laws to protect you from this technocracy. Okay, there's nothing standing in the way. The Constitution is nothing, because what overrides the Constitution is national security. Okay, they're saying that these data centers are for national security now, so the Constitution doesn't matter. See, they can use national security and it overrides everything in the Constitution. The Constitution is gone. Okay, under the national security, you see, and then they say it's vital for the economy. They're like, what economy? The economy don't serve no one but the elites. Okay, the upper echelon. You see, So you Americans are just being fitted for this new world order. Okay, that's the only thing that's being rolled out. That's the only policy that matters. Okay, that's the only thing Trump has been doing and implementing with this term is technocracy. That's it. You know, and depopulation. We're gonna get that as well. Depopulation and technocracy is the only thing that Trump, has been doing since he's got back in office since 2024, January 2024. Okay, he hit the ground running with the executive bill, for what Stargate, 500 billion of taxpayer dollars goes into what AI infrastructure. Okay, and now they saying that the NCAAP, want to sue because of that big data center colossus in Memphis, was just destroying J community. You see? Well, they said, well, look, y'all are a national security threat for speaking against it. Okay? And we gotta beat China. You see? Play a little more, I'm gonna skip up too.
US government is literally supporting the richest people in the world against the poorest people.
We're invited to join Technocracy's next, where you a private placement bond offering for accredited investors with target annual interest rates between 9 and 13%. Also, we offer a registered bond offering open to both accredited and non-accredited
in American society. And the crazy narrative that is being promoted by the US government and also by groups funded by Silicon Valley is that the protests in the US against the pollution carried out by data centers, well, if you protest these data centers destroying your community, then the US government wants everyone to believe that you're actually a stooge of China. And I'm not exaggerating. Axios reported that big tech corporations are funding AI groups to spread disinformation, claiming that protests in the US against data centers are all part of a Chinese plot. This is the kind of new Cold War propaganda that we're being subjected to.
God damn. All right, so let's go. Let's fast forward a little bit here. Okay. And he's just getting ready to blame everybody that's against him. He's making all these vague, categories for people. So now either you're, in cahoots with China. Okay. If you're against, American data centers. You see, because I say America has to get caught up. Okay. And they got some work to do in America, man. All right. That's between depopulation, all right, and compliance with this NWO. Okay, they got some work to do. Now you have, a lot of Americans, simpletons, that's going to be with it. That's going to willingly comply. Okay, but what's happening? You having a growing population of resistance, which is making the devil have to really speed up his agenda. Okay, but you have simpletons that worship AI, like simple niggas like Anton Daniels, niggas like that. Okay, they worship AI, and this is the best thing going. They worship this technology and look forward to this this techtopia. Okay, this dream of a techtopia society. Okay, that Esau is promising. So you have that sect of society as well. That's gonna voluntarily merge with technology. You see, but then there's a growing resistance population. Okay, which this devil is gonna have to come in, with the hammer. Now let's play this from here. Let me jump a little more.
Others have proven middling and worse, regressive and harmful. And
oh yeah, because it's another thing the devil is trying to go into. He's pushing Edomite supremacy. going into this new world order. That's why there's been a resurgence. Because Elon is big on that. You know, Twitter has turned into a good old boy, you know, platform. You know, X. Okay, which I don't be on it like that. You know, I try to limit myself being on too much. I try to keep it small and limited on this goddamn internet. But yeah, the sentiment with X, you know, it's just become, you know, a platform for white nationalists, you know, Edomite supremacy. You know, so that's another doctrine at the forefront of this new world order. Okay, so let's play this.
End quote. They're talking about the military. They're saying that young Americans should be forced to join the military, to join the war machine, to go wage these imperialist wars of aggression all around the world, in Iran and Venezuela and Iraq and Syria and Afghanistan, and who knows what country the US will attack next. Cuba, they're talking about invading Cuba. Palantir is proud of this because they profit from it. Palantir is a key contractor in the military industrial complex. They don't mention that, of course, but they will make money if the US government forces people to go fight more wars. Furthermore, in this same fascist manifesto, Palantir wrote that, quote, some cultures have produced vital advances, others remain dysfunctional and regressive. Others have proven middling and worse, regressive and harmful, end quote. So what they're saying is that Western white majority civilization is supposedly superior, and other civilizations, and they're primarily talking about people of color in the global south, especially Muslims, they're saying that they're inferior. I mean, this is a straight up fascist manifesto being espoused by one of the most powerful corporations in the world, Palantir. And when I warn that we're seeing the rise of techno-fascism in Silicon Valley, again, I am not exaggerating. Listen to the public comments of some of these billionaire oligarchs from Silicon Valley. And this is what they say publicly. Imagine what they say in private. This is what was written on Twitter by Peter Diamandis. And you may be asking, who exactly is Peter Diamandis? He is a Silicon Valley oligarch, a very wealthy investor, and he has a podcast in which he brings on other oligarchs like his friend, Elon Musk. And this is what he wrote on Twitter. Quote, a trillion sensors in space, in the air and on the ground, will allow us to know anything, anywhere, at any time. There will be no hiding. A good thing. Humans behave better when they're being watched, end quote. This is the mentality of these fascist billionaire oligarchs in Silicon Valley. They want to create the most sophisticated totalitarian surveillance state in human history, and they're doing it in the name of freedom and liberty. I mean, this is the dystopian regime in the US, which is enslaving its population and telling it that it's liberating them. And obviously, most Americans don't believe this, but there are some people who do. You know, the MAGA supporters, the Elon Musk fanboys, they think that the billionaire capitalist oligarchs who are enslaving them are actually their saviors. I mean, some Americans are the most brainwashed people on earth. I'm not saying all Americans are, but the people who drank the Kool-Aid and believe this stuff, they absolutely are. And it's so funny seeing how these same Silicon Valley billionaire oligarchs are constantly using libertarian rhetoric and saying the government should stop intervening in the economy, and they extol the almighty free market and say that the solution to every problem is privatization and allowing the free market to operate. Meanwhile, these same Silicon Valley oligarchs are getting billions of dollars of contracts and subsidies from the US government, and they're calling for a trillion sensors in space to monitor all human behavior at all times, to create the most dystopian totalitarian police state ever in human history. This is what they actually want, because these Silicon Valley oligarchs don't believe in anything. They certainly don't believe in freedom and all of that nonsense. All they care about is maximizing their wealth and becoming trillionaires, like Elon Musk has accomplished now. And they're basically buying up everything in US society. So, for instance, the right-wing billionaire oligarch Larry Ellison, who was the CEO of Oracle, and he's now the executive chairman, he and his son, David Ellison, are buying up all of the major media outlets in the US, like CNN and CBS News to spread propaganda for big tech corporations and oligarchs and Trump. This is why a Trump advisor referred to the billionaire Larry Ellison as the shadow president of the United States. And here I want to give credit to a.
So yeah, I'll put the link to the rest of this video. You can watch the rest of it. I just put the link up to it. So let's get a couple precepts, because what we're seeing the devil doing, you know, it's a real tacky, sloppy, execution of a new world order. You know, now he's going to catch people off guard because people are just oblivious, especially here in America. Okay, but as we, all right, if a brother can post that too, what's that? First Thessalonians chapter 5, verses 1 through 4. About the shot. First Thessalonians chapter 5, verses 1 through 4. So let's go here, because what is going to, and this is what's going to cause this war, because of all this treachery between these nations, you know, going into this new world order. You know, the Lord has these nations, all right, with their own agendas. Okay, they agree on the front end, but on the back end, these nations got their own agendas, man. Okay, because everybody wants power in this new infrastructure, in this new, all right, government that's being rolled out. Okay, it ain't enough power to go around, okay, for all these oligarchs and these nations, man. So Isaiah 33:1 is, woe to thee that spoilest, and thou was not spoiled, and dealeth treacherously, and they dealt not treacherously with thee. And this is America. And see, America has been in the power seat for so long, and America has been some whole ass niggas, man. And this and as the world superpower, you know, as the world lone superpower for a long time. Okay, America has been very treacherous, man. You know, it has stolen a lot, it has taken a lot, it has spoiled a lot of nations, man. It has bullied a lot of nations. Okay, so as now the tides are turning to where, you know, there's other superpowers in the earth now. Okay, Russia and China, you know, and then even Iran. Okay, surprising, you know, the earth with its military might, which the Lord said that great war will have great wrath. Now we've seen the prelude of it, because we know, okay, when this thing really gets going, okay, we're really going to see that great power from this alliance of nations that's going to take down the whore. And you know, America, America is in the crosshairs of all these nations, man. Even with the birthday of not the birthday, Salaki, the funeral of Kamani Alatoya, okay, the one that was killed January 28th. He was assassinated January 28th by small hats in America. He's his funeral, I think it was like 10 million people at his funeral. Over 100 different countries showed up. 100 different delegates from countries around the world showed up to his funeral. Okay, so there's some plotting against the West, man. Okay, especially America. It says, "And dealest not treacherously with thee, when thou shalt cease to spoil, thou shalt be spoiled." Okay, and when thou shalt make an end to deal treacherously, they shall deal treacherously with thee. You know, because we know this World War III is going to be the nation dealing treacherously, okay, against the whore. You see, and taking the whore off the map, and Yahweh Shai is going to come take all the ass off the map, man. Okay, so when you go into let's see, yeah, Mr. Brother GMSDC Yara 144K, it says First Thessalonians 5:1, it says, "But of the times and seasons, brethren, you have no need that I write unto you." Yeah, we know what time it is. You know, you see, we're in the know. See, this is going to catch a lot of people off guard, because they're not in the loop of prophecy. The Holy Spirit not dealing, you know, with the masses, is dealing with a few to have insight of what's going on and what time we're in. Okay, we know what time we in, man. We know the devil is itching towards this technocracy, man. He's making move towards making this technology merge with humanity. Okay, we know what the devil is on. All right. First Thessalonians 5:2 says, "For yourselves know perfectly that the day of the Lord so cometh as a thief in the night." Okay, and a thief is a night is something that's unexpected. You see, and these people are not expecting the transition of kingdoms. Okay, at best, you have certain people that look at China as being next, or some new, the BRICS, nations having next, or whatever. Okay, but no, there's going to be a transition. All right, from the kingdom of Esau to the kingdom of Jacob. All right, and it's going to be transitioned by Yahushua. They're not looking for Yahushua to show up in the midst of all this confusion. Okay, only the elected looking for that, man. Verse 3, it says, "For when they shall say peace and safety, then sudden destruction come up upon them, as travail upon woman with child, and they shall not escape." Okay, because that's one of the things that the devil, loves to declare. His technology, that his technology is going to bring, peace, abundance. Okay, safety. That's the thing. Everything that he does is for your safety. The flock cameras is for safety. The digital IDs for safety. They push all these things as safety. These are safety measures. Okay, so we know that these devils wanted that their marketing pitch of this new world order is safety. So we know if they push safety, as they roll out this new world order, okay, and sudden destruction is going to come up on them, because when they mandate that thing, all right, that's going to open the door for that sudden destruction. First Thessalonians 5:4, it said, "But ye brethren are not in darkness, that they shall overtake you as a thief." Yeah, so we're not in darkness, man. We know where we at in prophecy. You see, we know what the Lord is doing in the earth, man. We're paying attention to how our power is moving in the earth. The Lord's getting ready to do a mighty work. You see, so let's see. Yep, the brother got this one. It's the brother. This is brother. I know why. Abarata 144. Ecclesiastes 9:10. So, for a man also knows not his time, as the fishes that are taken in the evil net, and as birds that are caught in the snare, so are the sons of men snared in the evil time, when it falleth suddenly upon them. Okay, and the masses are within the nets of the elites, and they're going to be drawn in. Okay, so the devil just constantly casting this net, this infrastructure. All right, he's getting ready to pull this thing tight and draw it in. Okay, and most of the people are unaware of where they at in prophecy, man. Okay, because scripture says, "The victual shall be so good cheap on earth, that they shall think themselves to be in a good case." Because gas went up and then it dropped back down, and what they did, they just put people to sleep. They're in the deeper sleep than they were before the war now, because gas went up and went back down. And then Esau does these things as a state, as a psychological warfare, to put people in the coma, man. Okay, to have them spiritually checked out. You see, so let's go here, yeah, because the main thing is, because at the end of it, it's about a transition of power. Okay, and the devil, the closer he gets to try to extend his power, the closer he gets from losing all power. See, this is a gamble this devil loses, man. Because Esau, he's used to gambling in his kingdom and winning, but he's gonna lose on this gamble. And it's gonna be his biggest loss ever. He'll never recover from this, man. Okay, so we end to hear this, brother Yashima, tribe of Judah. All right, so Rock 11:5 said, many kings have set down upon the ground, and one that was never thought of have worn the crown. You know, and there's no one thinking of the men on the street corners with these Bibles as the next rulers of the earth. Okay, alongside Yahweh, whom they ignorantly call Jesus Christ. They're not expecting that. That's the last thing that these people expect, man. That's not even a thought. Okay, and it's beautiful, man. Okay, you people are in for a hell of a surprise, man. You know, the end of this kingdom is gonna be full of surprises, man. You know, and they all work in our favor if we are the elect. So, Lord will, you brothers, all right, and you few sisters edify once again. Want to give all praise and glory unto Yahweh, Bahashem, Yahushua, Bahashem, Makakadash, and double honors unto the apostles and the elders of GMS who rule well, teach well, being great examples towards younger brothers, and peace and blessings, salutation, hopefully, shalom.